The following session was recorded live in St. Louis, Missouri for the 2001 Annual International Association of Square Dance Callers. This is tape number 27, Convention Attendant, Open Forum.
Welcome. It's good to have you here. My name is Jerry Reed. We're here this afternoon to discuss, as it says in the convention direction, to discuss, it says a convention attendance, a discussion, a decision really. But as I mentioned during the opening session and a couple of times since, the purpose of the session is to be an open forum to really discuss all three of the bylaws changes that are coming to a vote tomorrow morning. And we do want to keep it as an open forum question. On the panel to my immediate left is Betsy Gata. Nice welcome for Betsy. And to her far right is Mr. John Marshall, is with us also. What we'd like to do is just to give you some of our own thoughts and then open it up for discussion and take questions and open discussion amongst everybody here. Okay? So to start everything off, here's John.
Okay. Again, open forum will have opportunities. We will remind everyone that we are being taped, so we would offer you the opportunity, if any questions or comments, to bring them to the microphone, please, or we will try to bring it to you, one or the other, and that would be most helpful for viewing and discussions. Obviously, if you've read your directions, you've seen comments and letters that have come in on the different subjects. I would like possibly to suggest that we ask first off if there's... Yes? Go ahead. Why don't you break in? You're the man. Go ahead. Break in.
Actually, the introduction I said was that we're going to discuss the three bylaws changes. I believe it would probably be helpful for me to review what those changes are. The first one is going to be to a resolution to change Article 2 of the bylaws, and we have, that looks like it, yeah. The bottom line of this bylaws change will be to eliminate the attendance requirement at a CALLERLAB Convention or mini-lab for full voting status. All attendance. This will eliminate completely any convention attendance requirements for voting membership. The second resolution has to do with eliminating the board term limits that were enacted. What was it? Maybe 4 years ago. It was actually enacted. It takes effect this year with the election this year. And the final bylaws change will modify the longevity status that we have in the bylaws, which now states that in order to attain longevity status, you must be a member of CALLERLAB for 8 consecutive years, and we're looking to the bylaws change would get rid of the word consecutive, so that people would be able to qualify for the longevity status with 8 years total.
Am I correct in believing that the longevity status only has Am I correct in believing that the longevity status that you refer to has only to do with exemption from the active calling requirement?
That and convention.
But if we eliminate the convention attendance requirement,
correct,
then that's no longer an issue.
Correct. We could in fact.
But if we voted one of them and not the other, then I would understand.
And what could happen is that we could eliminate the consecutive 8 years, retain convention attendance requirement, so that after 8 years of CALLERLAB membership, the requirement for calling 50 dances a year would go away, so that they would not require still that calling, ongoing calling requirement. Thank you. So that's a good point that Jim brought up. Okay? With that, back to John.
It appears to me, as I was just asking Jerry, that we might be best served for time and consideration if we addressed for everyone here concerns, issues about that particular issue we were just discussing, the 8 consecutive year issue. It seems to be one of the simplest ones of the three that we're talking about. Hopefully you have your bylaws issues with you. If not, we can talk to you about what it says. And they were in everybody's packet, and they were shown as modified. If you do have it, it is on page 3, and we'll go over it in case anyone has any questions. We'd like you to bring them out to us. But section 2, letter A, it would now read, has either been an active member in good standing for 8 years or is an active caller as defined in section 1A, which we'll go back to. Now, it used to read consecutive for 8 consecutive years. And we're talking about taking that part out. And it's a very simple change. This is not earth-shattering. It's not tied to the other part necessarily. It can certainly stand alone as a change. It doesn't have sweeping ramifications, I don't believe. Where's the other place, Jerry? That's the place I referenced. Okay. Yeah, and under retired member E on the preceding page 2, at the bottom on E1, it defines definition under retired member, a person who has been an active member for 8 consecutive years. We're not saying it just simply doesn't have to be consecutive. Right? It says has been 8 years active at some point in time. They don't have to be consecutive years. It simply allows for people who may have been missed a year for illness, whatever, duty transfers that didn't allow them to be an active caller. We're not penalizing them. I think it allows for some freedoms there, and that was part of the reasoning behind it. Jerry, are there other reasons that I haven't mentioned? Those are the most reasons for it. We don't think it's a dramatic issue, but some folks have tried to, I guess not intentionally, but they've tried to link it to other things, and it muddies the water, and I think we can keep it rather straightforward. That's really all that is about. And are there any questions or comments about that portion of it? Again, open forum is for you guys and ladies to comment on, question, whatever. Yes, Chuck Jaworski, you want to come up to the mic? All right. That would be great, John. We'd appreciate the assist.
Are there many members that actually fall in this category? Jerry?
I'm sorry.
Are there many members that actually fall under this category that have that problem of that?
Actually, I would suspect we probably have, I haven't looked at all, but I know that there's at least probably 20 to 30 in that range, I would suspect. I know that I've looked up at least 10 that would fall into that category. That's 10 out of the 2,000 in the database.
And are these generally members that had a problem with health for a year or something?
I really don't know. There's really no way to tell. Most of them are very long-term members. I mean, people who were members for maybe like 6 years and then had a 2-year break and then another 6 years or something.
Would there be any members that perhaps were CALLERLAB members, left CALLERLAB for another organization and then came back?
That's certainly possible. There's no way for me to know that, though. All I know is that they weren't CALLERLAB members.
And again, primarily what we're looking at is a way to remove a barrier to this portion of good standing, being a member in good standing. So that's all it would do, is remove a barrier and also take away something that could stand in the way of a retired member. And as I say, somewhat simple. Okay. I think we could go on. Betsy, do you have anything on that?
I was just questioning Jerry to make sure I had the right mental set, that sometimes people were active full members, and for some reason, pressures of business, economics or whatever, they could not meet their convention attendance after a certain number of years, and that could create a break in membership, and it might be due to no fault of their own, and that I think was one of the things they wanted to take into consideration.
Yeah, I'd misled Betsy. I did lead you astray. I apologize for that. This really is the active membership, and that applies to the number of dances that a person calls per year. Right now, active is defined as at least 50 dances per year, averaged over the last 3 years.
Am I correct in understanding that if I've been active and a full member for 8 years, I am then exempt from the active calling requirement for full membership? That's not what I read here. I think I read that I have to become a retired member.
On page 3. Yeah.
The good standing paragraph is the one that gives me exemption from the active calling requirement.
Right. Has either been an active member in good standing for 8 years,
or is an active caller.
Or is an active caller as defined in Section 1, which is
okay. So
calling
I
at least 50
can
dances.
have been an active member for 8 years, and then I don't have to be an active caller. Yes. But
correct.
Can I be a full member?
You would have to still meet the convention requirements.
Yes, but I don't have to continue as an active caller. Talking about my situation, forever I've been calling.
Correct.
I've been an active caller. I am no longer an active caller. Does that mean I cannot be a full member?
Correct. If what was your question again? To make sure I understand your question. Yeah.
I've been for more than 8 years a full active member and an active caller.
Correct.
I am no longer an active caller.
Correct.
I'm calling less than 50 dances a year.
Right. In your particular circumstance, though, you have been 8 consecutive years.
Yes, for 8. I meet that all the requirements, but I am now no longer active. Am I still able to be a full voting member?
Correct.
I am.
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought I understood. I wanted to be sure.
In your particular case, you qualify because it's been 8 consecutive years. There are people who have 8 years that aren't consecutive. Correct. And they would not be full members, voting members.
Milt Floyd from Minneapolis. In looking at the bylaws, Jerry, active member by our current bylaws without the changes has been eligible for membership, has attended an annual meeting, and then it gets into the calling activity. So what Betsy was saying earlier about callers that, for whatever reason, couldn't attend a convention, their active membership would have been dropped. They would have been an associate member, as our bylaws are now without changes. Is part of this consecutive year to address that situation as well?
It's actually, Mel, there's actually 2 separate issues. The way the current bylaws are structured, you have to meet 2 things. You have to be actively calling, and you have to attend convention.
Correct.
Okay. If you miss either one of those, then you lose the full voting membership.
Okay.
What this bylaws change will do, if approved, will only eliminate the word consecutive, which means if you're calling for 8 years total and still meet convention attendance requirements, then you're a voting. The situation that Jim is in now, because he has been calling, he has been an active member for 8 consecutive years, so his calling can now go down to 20 or 30 dances a year. As long as he maintains his convention attendance requirements, he maintains voting membership. Does that answer your question, or?
Kind of.
Okay. Well, if I need to make it more clear,
may I ask a question, Jerry, or
Certainly.
make a suggestion? It may be that you say 8 years, regardless of how attained, as an easier way of explaining it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Just a thought.
Again, the board went through this, and you can see how it begins to muddy. And we did this by email. You can imagine what happened. And the very thing that happened, as we said, amongst us right here, and is starting to happen out there, is we immediately tried to tie into the first part, and that's where it got confusing. And that's why I was trying to keep them separate, because what's happening here is one thing. We need to treat it with blinders, if you will, as this is talking about just this one aspect, Now, if something happens to the other aspect, that'll be a different issue altogether, and we'll talk about it that way. I think it'll become more clear if we try to do that. But yeah, we ended up going round and round by email over that same situation. The very same thing happened to us, and I was praying we could avoid it here.
I think I have a way of putting this. I think I have a way of putting this that may make some sense. I've been a member for, say, 4 years, and then for some reason, pressures of work or whatever, I'm not an active caller, I'm not a member for 3 years. At this point in time, I would now have to have 8 years of membership in order to be in Jim's standing, even though I had 5 prior years.
8 additional years.
8 additional years. Now, if this revision passes, instead of needing 8 additional years, I would now need 3 years to be added to my 5 years to give me 8 years of membership.
And it can also be that the situation is where people have not gone to another organization, nor have they left CALLERLAB, nor have they left calling. It is simply that instead of calling 50 dances a year, they begin to call 40 dances a year. And so then their 8 consecutive year has that break. So if for 2 years, say a person calls 50 dances a year for 6 years, and then calls 25 dances and 25 dances, and then starts back in the 50 years, that, like Betsy says, the 8 starts over again because it's 8 consecutive years.
It's kind of like for my early retirement, I bought back time in my pension plan. So I didn't have 26 years in my pension plan. I had 31. It's like a buyback idea.
Larry Davenport from California. Just as a clarification on that when the break occurs, under active member definition, it says defined as calling dances on at least a weekly basis, averaging over the prior 3 years. So it doesn't sound like it's an immediate break, but it takes more to fall. You have to fall below that average as opposed to just have a brief period.
That's correct, and the administrative the way that the Home Office administers that is through the BMI ASCAP license, because we have a category of license for under 50 and a category license for over 50, and that's how the Home Office manages that particular situation. Okay, any other comments on just that one aspect, the consecutive?
Just a thought in your presentation.
Name, please?
Mel Dixon from Reading, Massachusetts. If in your presentation, it might make it clearer if you only addressed retired member first and not try and tie it in with in good standing. That helped to confuse me.
That's a good point. Okay, thanks. Okay, probably the next one to that will probably take a look. What do you think of the board? Board first. The next one is term limits. Board term limits. If I remember correctly, that's back in Article 4. Page 8 of the bylaws at the very top there, and that's under Board of Governors election, top of page 8. Yeah, the big B. And you can see what is struck through is the way the bylaws read now, and the change that we're going to be voting on, if approved, would completely eliminate that section. Basically what that section says, and you can read it just as well as I, that beginning with the election in this year, in the year 2001, this, by the way, this bylaws, the bylaws have not always had this in here. This was voted in, I want to say maybe 3 years ago. I don't know the exact timing of it. Was it 4 years? 4 years ago, when this was voted in with the long-term goal of implementing it this year. It probably says
on the front of the page. It says
there's some other revisions.
It was approved March of '97.
Yeah, but I'm not sure. I don't think that one was part of it. It may have. It was.
If there's no subsequent approval, then it would have to have been done. Yes.
Yeah, it was then. Basically, what the bylaws say, the current bylaws say that with the election beginning in this year, 2001, any board member who, as a result of that election, would serve more than 3 consecutive terms is not eligible to run for that bylaws for the board during that term or during that election. And Larry just walked in with a yellow piece of paper, which we have several others here. Mary, could you maybe hand these out? Thank you. This is a piece of paper that we put together not a year ago, but close to. It's been out quite some time. We published it in Direction a couple of times, and it's did you know kind of things. And if you look at number 2, I think that's significant. 15 members of the board were first elected after 1994. That's only 7 years ago. 4 members of the board were first elected in 1998. That was only 3 years ago. And the significance of that is that, let's look at number 3 there. 4 members of the board were first elected. So there was a turnover of 4 members of the board that year. That was only 3 years ago. We also did a study of the history of the board, and the board as it is today is, and I'm not sure if the number is on here. I guess it's not. We looked at the board as it was 10 years ago and the board that exists today, and there are only, I want to say maybe 4 members of the board who are on the board today who were on the board 10 years ago. And the significance that I see in that is that without term limits, there has been a tremendous turnover of people on the board without the term limits.
I wanted to speak to this. I was there and strongly believed in term limits when we voted it in, because there was a definite perception about the board being the same people all the time, and it was causing disgruntlement and unhappiness among the members who had expressed that to us. And one of the things the board is trying to do and tries to do is to respond to the members' feelings and the members' concerns. So the board felt that if we put in term limits, that it would help the perception that it was always the same people, the clique, the good old boys, and I put boys in quotation marks. But it would help the perception that it was just the same people over and over getting elected to the board. And what has happened is that people have decided that in their own, with their own judgment, that they've served long enough, that they need a break. Other people have been elected. There have been changes made. And one of the things that I have seen, I was on the board for more than it's 12 years before. So that was that was like my 3 terms or whatever. But the point being, one of the things that I have seen is that some of the same concerns come up repeatedly without people who remember what we did before. We have to search through the reams of paper records, and we end up repeating the same business over and over again. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, the board meeting goes very long. Was that an understatement? It met on
significantly so.
It met on Sunday until 1 a.m. from when we started. We started at 2. We had a break to socialize, and they gave us some food, and then it went back into meeting until 1 a.m. It will start again on Wednesday, and the goal is to be out by 6 o'clock. I have heard that goal every year that I've been on the board. I have not seen it achieved more than once. The point being that it's a very long meeting. Anything that will help to facilitate the business being done and making changes rather than doing the same thing and making the same mistake again, or going over the same ground again when somebody can say, look, we did this, we tried it, it didn't work. That can help the organization. So therefore, I think we need some of the long-term members. I have read some articles about term limits in Congress, and it's an interesting fact that the articles were published by organizations that some of them would be politically to the right, some of them would be politically to the left, but the whole point is that both of those groups think that the limitations of terms in Congress should be done by the voters. If we take away the choice of a person to run, then we have actually taken away part of your right to vote for the people that you want to vote for. And it may put some of the members of the board or the people running on the line, so that if the voters don't think, if the membership don't think that we've done a good job, they vote us out of office. That can hurt. But that would be our job and our problem. If we take away your choice, so you can't vote for the person you feel is the best candidate, then you may not care to vote at all. In a recent election, I think there were a presidential election, and I don't want to get into politics, but I think there were a lot of people who felt that neither candidate were worth voting for. So there was a great disaffection. We want people involved in the organization, and we don't want to take away the right of choice for the best people for the job.
Yeah, Larry? One of the things I just wanted to mention in favor of proceeding with this way is I think we should present this as it was put in place to solve a problem that the data shows does not in fact exist.
That's a very good point. A couple of points also. This situation, or this bylaw change, actually came about because of exactly that research by the Home Office, because we looked at the composition of the board as it has been over the past few years, and a projection of what it was going to be in the future. And it's a big concern of the Home Office that the effect this year is not tremendous. The effect over the next 2 years could be that there would be 70% turnover in board membership. And that loss of continuity, I got to be frank with you, just scares the pants off of me because as Betsy said, the board meetings are long. There's some sticky issues that we need to discuss, and we need that corporate knowledge to perhaps bring us back into line and to remind us that we've been down that path before, and we have the paths that we've exhausted. Not to say we shouldn't look at them again, but to give us some historical perspective in that. One of the other things also that Betsy mentioned is that term limits really do take away some of the voters' rights to vote who they want to vote for. In the past, it seems to me, and when I'm voting for board members, the only people I really know are the people that I know. And silly as that sounds, but I vote for people that I know, and people that I don't know, I know nothing about them. One of the things that the board is looking seriously at is reporting of board voting records. The board is looking at that to provide the membership more information about a particular board person, and not to put anybody on a report, but if there are board members who never respond to anything, I as a member would say, I'm not sure I want that person back on the board, no matter how popular they are, or even how much I like them. If they're not performing and doing the job, I think that's important. This year also there were 3 new people coming on the board, 3 new people coming on. Next year there's the same situation where there are 3 incumbents who are not running. So that would 3 more people there. And that's the type of turnover that we've had. And I think Chuck had a...
Well, if 4 years ago the membership felt very strongly to vote term limits in, and I'm sure 4 years ago the board meetings were just as long as they are now. What has changed? Also, you did mention about the number of people that have turned over. Can you tell us what board members, if any, incumbents ran and were not reelected? Can you think of any? I can think of two. I believe the percentage over the last 15 years, listen, I checked at home, is close to 97% of all incumbents that have run have been reelected.
Yeah, that's correct. And
the latest data I got from the Chicago Public Library said that the House of Representatives in 1988 had a 90% voting of incumbents, and the Senate had 98.5%. Now we're talking about 97% of all incumbents. If the people were not allowed to run a fourth term, if they had so many terms they had to be off, it would only be for a year. This organization, 2 years, this organization has survived the resignation of a chairman, the premature death of an executive secretary, and it survived. Part of the thing about being in a leadership position is to cultivate more leadership. If there's a void of more leadership available, then perhaps the people in leadership capacity are not cultivating more leadership.
Well, the point about the incumbents is certainly valid, and nobody would I think take issue to that. However, the looking at the history of the board over certainly the last 10 years, there has been a tremendous turnover of the people on the board. And as I mentioned before, this particular bylaws change was originated again by the Home Office and the concern that the Home Office has. I think Greg may have had a...
Greg Anderson, Colorado. One of the points that Chuck brought up that you responded to somewhat, Jerry, I wanted to go back to that. In that paragraph that we're striking out, the last sentence of that says, however, once the governor has left office, he would not be eligible for nomination for a period of 12 months. And that's why, Chuck, when you said 1 year, John held up two fingers indicating two, because take myself as an example. I have voluntarily, a year ago, sought not to run for re-election at the end of my term, which is with this convention. With the rules as they stand, because I voluntarily left the board and because I didn't have 3 consecutive terms, I could, at this convention, if I so desired, circulate a petition to run for election this fall, and 1 year from now be sitting back in the board meeting should I be elected. I would not be a voting member until the point of new business on Wednesday. The way this wording is, if the situation and we had the term limits, once I had 3 consecutive terms, I could not then, at this convention, assuming I had 3 consecutive terms, circulate a petition to run again in the fall and be conceivably elected for the board a year from now. I'd have to wait 1 additional year. I'm curious from a viewpoint of, let me pick on you, Chuck. Let's say that you would like to see the term limits stay on the bylaws. Does it make any difference to one who feels that they should remain if that last sentence were changed were deleted to get rid of that 12-month waiting period? In other words, if we still had term limits, I'm parsing this and dividing up into little parts that could be analyzed as 2 separate things. What would that have any impact? How would you feel about that?
Yes, I would favor that.
Okay. Anybody at this point? Okay, I'd like to say a couple of comments. I'm not always sure that the time frame in between makes a difference. I was off the board for at least 2, if not 3 years. I don't remember. I think it was 2, and then I put in to run again. And of course that takes the year process. So I was away for 3, and then got reelected. And that 2 years I was very much not in presence due to personal reasons. I was not a presence in this creative world, period. Not only here, but calling or anything else. And it seemed to make not a ton of difference. I was pleased to be able to come back and offer something. But there's 2 sides to this, I think. We have the value of experience and the value of change. certainly the value of change can bring fresh ideas, new energy, new commitment, and I think that's a valuable asset. Do we want, can you have 100% new ideas and so on? I don't think so. I don't think that's stable, but I think it's valuable, and we're having a certain amount of that. Institutional memory is a very valuable tool in not only getting work done, but we start talking about things not only within our organizations, but even in the law. We hear people talk about the intent of the law was or is. Our intent of our motion at the time we did so and so was this. There's a lot of that occurs in the boardroom because we are trying to go forward with what the consensus and sense of the board was, what the consensus of the membership was. Institutional memory is a real thing. It has existed in our country for more than 200 years. Mastery of board business takes a while. I won't tell you that it takes 12 or 14 years to learn how to do that. Some people will never do it, but some people do it well. Some people bring a certain level of that type of mastery with them because they brought it from the private sector, and that's a great addition to the board quite often, particularly if it comes in a package with someone who is particularly effective calling and knows our world of square dance, which is really a great package when we can get it. I think that term limits can prevent us from keeping our top talent, and it can keep us from being able to remove dead wood, if you will. Well, I know that's a rather cold term, but if we have someone who's not functioning, who's not doing anything, but they're there, they get there 3 years or 4 years or whatever it is, because that's what term limits are. What if the term limit was extended even longer? What if we said, okay, well, you get 14 years?
John, you said that 3 years would take care of term limits. It's 3 terms.
3 terms.
3 years.
Yes.
It's 9 years.
Yeah, thank you, John. Appreciate the correction.
And
I misspoke.
what Jerry talked about earlier is that if you publish the statistics, this particular year there were 88 items that we were supposed to vote on through email. If we published a record of the members of the board, if they responded to 87 of the votes or 86 of the votes, that might be acceptable. But if they only voted for 60 of the votes, maybe that's not acceptable. That's a self-policing thing which eliminates the necessity for term limits.
Well, I think the board is looking for ways of effectively, say it in any other way, accountability to its members, because I think the membership deserves that. So we're looking for some ways to provide that. The other thing that bothers me a little bit is when we start throwing around percentages. Now, anybody that knows me, that if you put a dollar sign in front of it, I can usually do math. But after that, I'm not so great. But when we start talking percentages, but we only have 25 people and we have a term situation of X number of years, and only so many people can go off, all of a sudden it seems to me the percentages can show very high numbers of percentage when in fact it may not be relevant to the actual turnover that we're seeing. And somebody might help me with that who's better with numbers. Maybe Greg can do that for me. But you know what I'm saying? All of a sudden the numbers can seem much higher, much worse than they are, or much better. Any way you play with the numbers.
If you only had 2 votes and they only voted once, you can say, boy, this person only voted half the time.
Yeah, that's that kind of thing. And the same way with turnovers. I think probably my biggest point is that we have frequent elections. We have an election every year. Term limits are not going to solve member apathy. Our percentage of responding, voting members is low. It has been low. It continues to be low. We cannot legislate away apathy. We can't do it. You can try all you want to let term limits take the responsibility away from the members, but that's not going to do it, and they have a responsibility to vote and to choose. It's their freedom to choose. It's their right to choose. But it's also their responsibility to do it, and you can't legislate it away, and I don't think you serve a purpose by trying to do that. And we have 2 hands up. Cliff has his hand up with the mic, and then Chuck will give you a shot. Absolutely.
Cliff Simpson, Palm Springs, California. 2 comments. First, I would like to know, not so much as the person's voting record, but rather how long has this person been on the board. There I can make a decision. My decision is this person been on too long? Is it time for a change? And I may think not, okay, but still I have that information. The other thing is the board self-policing, and does the board have authority to do something as we do in the other committees? If a person doesn't respond twice, they're off.
The answer there is that I really like your suggestion, and I think I'll bring that to the board and discuss that. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Your second point of, I forget your second point. The board can only remove a member for some criminal type, a very serious transgression. The membership, however, can remove board members, and I believe it's like 2/3 of the voting members. Okay, so the board really does not. If a board member is not responding, the chairman can and has an obligation to go to the board member and say, look, either start answering your mail, doing the job, or it can be requested to resign. And has been done. And has, as I understand, before I got involved with the picture, people have resigned. And others have not resigned, but they have started to do the job. So that's really the self-policing there. If it really pardon me? Okay. And John confirmed that is correct. However, the membership has the ability to remove any board member. And I think Chuck had...
To Chuck Jaworski from Chicago, to answer or respond back to John. We have no idea what the effect of term limits would have on apathy voting. We've never had term limits. We don't know what the effect it would be. I do believe there are members out there that perhaps don't vote because they feel that a certain number of people that are looking at the ballot are going to be elected anyway. That's the first point. Second point, term limits have served Round the Lab since its inception very well. It has also served Lloyd Shaw Foundation, which is a much smaller organization, but certainly asset-wise has assets more than CALLERLAB, and they have term limits. It's worked well for them too. So companion groups like ours have worked well with term limits.
There certainly can be, examples on both sides of that. So, but point well taken. Yeah, I think maybe one more.
Milt Floyd from Minneapolis. If we eliminate term limits for the board, what effect has it been looked at? What the effect would be on prospective new members applying for board membership? Would it have a negative effect in that I would like to run for the board, but looking at who's there, I know I would never get elected?
That certainly is a possibility. However, we must realize that term limits are not in effect. I mean, up until the election this year, there was no discussion. There was no threat or whatever of term limits. It just didn't exist in actuality until the election that we're going to have this August. So the people who have I really can't speak for how people would react, but it hasn't stopped over the past 25 years of people running. And we've always had, and correct me again if I'm wrong, John, but it seems like we've always had, 10 to,
normally
12
what
to 13
happens,
people running.
I can address that by saying that each year we elect either 8 or 9 members to the board. There are candidates who choose to run for the board contingent upon who is running for re-election. That they say, well, I'm going to sit out this year or I'm going to run this year because I think I have a real chance. And I think that's a self-policing action, that the results of the elections over the years have been self-policing, and the term limits may be unnecessary.
I want to add one thing about what Milt said about I look and see who's running and I'd never be elected. I do not at this point in time remember how many years I ran for the board before I got anywhere near it, but it was quite a long time, and I was quite discouraged, and I almost gave it up. And Gene Trimmer spoke to me and said, no, you need to continue because you have things to offer. Mike Jacobs ran for several years. He has a tremendous amount of knowledge, a tremendous capability, and he was not elected immediately. The fact that you are not elected immediately may or may not be helped by who is running as an incumbent. I personally, and I know that I swim upstream sometimes, but I personally will look and see who I think probably would be elected, and then what I try and do is cast my votes for the people who are not going to be automatic, who I feel would benefit the board by change. And maybe we need to be encouraging people to do that.
Becky Jaworski from Illinois. Just wanted to ask a question about why, okay, you have term limits set in right now. I mean, you do have a term limit now, right?
Beginning with the election in August of this year.
Yes, because that was passed. Now, why is it being changed? The reasons you give is because it's going to do away with apathy? Is that what you're saying?
No.
It's going to make the board better? Is that what you're saying?
It's going to provide consistency, continuity, and a retaining of that corporate knowledge on the board.
But I think you have a lot of good members in this organization that can do just as well a job as those out there.
That's correct.
I mean, you have a president that was just elected. Clinton served 2 terms. He's out. You have a brand new president. To use, to say that we need continuity, therefore we should get rid of the term limits, well, then that means we don't elect a new president.
And answer to that, if the board had not changed over the past 10 years, I would never have brought this up. I would say we're operating with the same board year after year after year after year after year, but looking at the past history, that's not what has happened. What has happened is we have had a turnover of the board. We have had new people. We have had new ideas, and believe me, the board that is in operation today is nothing like the board that John dealt with when he was.
Okay. Is it any worse? Is the organization any worse off?
No. I mean, it's.
Well, we don't have a very good reason to do away with the term limit then.
I'll try to address that, Becky, if I may. Jim, I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand. You're hiding behind the podium here.
One reason that occurs to me, and I grant you I have a vested interest in this because I'm the only member that's been on the board from the beginning. But the most compelling reason for me is that there are a few outstanding leaders in any organization, and our board is no different. We have a few members who are and have been very effective. And this term limit would remove from this board over the next 2 years several of our most effective leaders. And that's a personal judgment. I grant you there's no way to measure leadership in this setting except from my own personal observation having been on the board since the beginning of time. But the reason I'm in favor of not continuing or not putting into effect term limits is that several of our most effective leaders would be removed from the board in the next 2 years. We might be able to replace them with good leadership, but a 70% turnover in 2 years is a very scary thing.
I would also want to comment, too, that you referenced the idea of the presidency, and I understand that. Presidency has a significant level of unilateral type power, and it may well be a good place for it. I don't think that we need term limits when we're talking about a team or a group type mentality of functioning together. I don't think term limits are desirable in that case. But going back to the very first thing you said, I think Jim just addressed that. It also heavily impacts people in terms of being able to run and commit to running for the executive committee, and the term limits come up, and all of a sudden then you're very limited to who you can elect from within the board for the EC, because you can't elect them because they're not going to be eligible or they're not going to be in office, and then you're also limiting even a greater extent on who you can have. Only I would like to caution here, I don't want to limit the forum except that we have one whole bylaws section that we haven't addressed yet, and we're going to shorten out on time. We have a little bit more time for this, but then let's keep that in mind.
Can I make one before we move on? A couple of things I'd like to mention. What I said earlier was one of the reasons for putting this on the table now is it appears to be addressing a problem that doesn't exist. And if 15 members of the board were first elected after 1994, that's 60% of the current board was not serving before 1994. The other thing I wanted to mention, though, is that I think people should keep in mind that while work goes on year-round, this is an organization that physically meets face-to-face once a year. And it's not a quick process to learn how this organization works when you get together physically once a year. And so, people may be, say under term limits, people may be serving for 9 years, but I don't think you should think of that in terms of 9 years. They've actually only met together 9 times over the course of that period of time. And so, even if we were to keep term limits in place, I think that for the organization having leadership that really develops, I think even 9 years or just 9 meetings is limiting.
I want to make a point about the fact that we, quote, have term limits currently, unquote. We have them in the bylaws. Since they have not yet taken effect, they have not actually influenced any changes in the board as of yet. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. All of the changes that we have had in the board and the motions and the flexibility have come about without the term limit yet taking effect.
Yes. One more comment, then we do need to move on to the...
Yes. You're talking about Bill Dixon from Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. You're talking about losing people possibly over 2 years. Mm-hmm. How many each consecutive year? Because as was just mentioned in CALLERLAB, that's been able to work in other organizations where you have people who are willing. I happen to my wife is president of the Square Dance Foundation New England, and we don't find the volunteers. But when you've got volunteers, it seems to me that the changeover, and I'd like to know how many would be lost next year, how many the year after. You should have those figures.
Chair, may I make a comment?
Yes.
John Keltenteller, Pocono Pines, Pennsylvania. I think we may be losing sight of the fact that we have a potential problem here that we've tried to address. We tried to address it by establishing term limits, and we felt that 3 terms was a reasonable number, and we're now starting to see that we have some people who would be eligible not to be renominated because of having met the requirement of the term limits. But the overriding concern of the members say, listen, I think that caller is an effective leader. I want to vote for him. You don't have the right to deny me the privilege of voting for him. It's been self-policing, and it has worked. There are 8 or 9 members of the board elected each year. And if the membership felt that an individual had served too many years, they don't have to vote for that person. But if enough of the members who vote feel that that person remains an excellent candidate for the board, why should we deny them that opportunity to vote for the person of their choice?
Okay, what I'd like to do then is to, and again, we don't want to limit the discussion. However, we do have one more point to talk about. And as John says, tomorrow morning, there will be this will be open for discussion also. The last point, the last bylaws change that we will be voting on is to eliminate the requirement to attend a convention or a mini lab in addition to your calling 50 dances a year to attain and retain voting status. This particular point was brought to light as a result of a committee, an ad hoc committee created by the board 2 years ago. Must have been 2 years ago. The Member Services Committee, who did a survey and got results back from members and non-members. And the big point in that survey was the fact that in order to retain membership in CALLERLAB, you had to attend a convention once every 4 years or once every 6 years, depending on where you live. And because of the recommendation from that committee, the board voted to approve this bylaws change. And that, again, is the change that's in the marked up copy that you've got that will be voted on tomorrow, and is the one that completely eliminates convention attendance requirements. You would no longer have to attend a convention or a mini-lab in order to retain the voting status. John?
John Galton-Teller. Would it be possible to allow a change to the recommended changes to the bylaws at tomorrow's meeting? And if so, could we eliminate the fact that we can eliminate the requirement to attend conventions on a recurring basis, but you still must attend at least one before you can become a full voting member?
As I understand Robert's rules, when the motion is made, at that point, amendments to the motion can be made and discussed and voted on. So,
Greg Anderson, Colorado. I want to reemphasize what John just said, because to me, that, from a personal perspective, is a critical point. I have been disturbed at the possibility of someone being able to be a voting member of CALLERLAB without ever having attended the convention. But by the same token, I could easily go along with something like that. Once they have attended a CALLERLAB convention, I'll leave it up to the fate of their finances, etc., for any time into decades of the future as to whether they're ever able to attend a convention again. But I think attending that one is very much an important item to learn the impact, the meaning of what CALLERLAB is all about. And I'm pleased that there is an opportunity for an amendment process at the Wednesday meeting.
As a point of information, as you might well imagine, I think Vernon was next. Chuck was first.
Who is next?
Chuck.
Vernon.
As a point of information, as you might well imagine, this particular issue generated a tremendous amount of email correspondence among the board, and Greg's point and John's was in fact part of that discussion, and I cannot recall exactly how the vote went one way or another on those type of amendments, but it was certainly discussed, and it's a very viable issue to discuss also, and can be amended. I think Chuck had a...
Chuck Jaworski. I'm sure there's a number of people here this year that are here because they have to be here. If we change the requirement to not having to attend the convention, will we therefore drop the attendance numbers so low that perhaps it becomes unfeasible to have a convention?
Okay, Jerry would comment to that. I would too. I think it's a fair concern, Chuck. I think it's a reasonable question. I don't think we know the answer, but I am very concerned that whether it be a regular convention or a mini lab, that we feel that all we have to offer is membership. If that's all they're coming for, they're coming for the wrong reason, and that's a really sad situation. I'm not saying it's not a reality. I didn't say that. But I would really hate to believe that's the only reason anybody would come to a convention. That Jerry was asking to respond, and I'm trying to write down names as hands go up. I know that Jim's hiding behind the podium. He's not going to get recognized till he moves his seat. No, I do have Jerry's going to go. I've got Vernon is next, and then Cliff, and then Jim, and who else? Otto. I write down Otto. And I know that Chuck wants to respond to what I said.
Yeah, go ahead, Chuck. All I can say is to echo some of what John said. That's a very real concern.
That's not quite what I meant. What I meant is there a number a low number that we have physically, feasibly, financially? Is there a point we get to? Is there a number we have to have a convention? Is it 150? Is it 200?
In actuality, no. What happens, though, is that we negotiate the contract with the hotel 2 or 3 years out. So we're projecting 3 years out how many people are going to be there. In the past, that projection has always been based on a quarter of the membership, because a quarter of the membership has to come every once every 4 years. You got to come. So that's the way we projected in the past. Without this, there's really no way to project. If we have 50 people show up, we would have a facility that would support 50 people.
Oh, okay.
So
That's what I'm asking.
But however, if I've negotiated with a hotel for 400 and 50 show up, then we're in trouble. Yeah. I think Vernon.
Yes, Vernon Jones from Texas. A couple of questions, please, just to help me to understand. If this passes, will the voting procedure that is currently in place today still be in effect, whereas the membership here at the convention votes on the general business on Wednesday morning, and then it goes out? I mean, if somebody joins and they don't have to attend a convention, that would be the only part they would be voting on.
I thought I understood your question, then
until I blew it.
Until the end, yeah.
Jerry, can I address that?
Sure.
I believe that the requirement would be that the people who would be allowed to vote on this are those that are now voting members.
That is correct.
If this passes, then the next general meeting in which there is a call to convention with specific items they would be eligible to vote on without having attended a convention, but not on this issue.
That is correct. They would.
That would be my interpretation.
Only the voting members can vote on this issue.
I thought Vernon was talking about when a mail ballot goes out after the convention, there is an opportunity to turn over
Correct.
A convention vote. And is that what you were trying to get clarification on, Vernon?
For this particular, let me see if I can understand the question and provide a real answer. For this particular issue, it will be voted on tomorrow morning, and then a mail ballot will be voted or sent to the voting members as they are today. If this passes, then at next year's convention, whatever business we vote on would go to every member of CALLERLAB who is calling over 50 dances a year. No, we would still vote at the convention. Whatever business is done at the convention, followed by a mail vote.
And would you keep talking and tell the people what percentage of votes it takes to override a convention vote, please?
It takes a 2/3 majority of the votes of the voting membership to override a vote taken at the convention.
The voting membership or those who vote?
The
Votes cast. Two-thirds of votes cast, I think.
Correct. There has to be a 2/3. There has to be a.
Jerry, if you send out 1,500 votes after this convention,
Correct.
and only 500 of them vote, that's only
Correct.
1/3. They cannot override the decision taken
Correct.
at this convention. That's right.
Correct. There has to be
2/3 of those voting and responding.
correct and responding. That's yes. I think that's clear. So, Cliff.
Okay, I have Cliff Simpson, Palm Springs, California. I have some very strong feelings about this because I was first invited to join CALLERLAB in the 70s, late 70s. Again, maybe John will remember, around 80 or 81 from John. I did join at that time, and because of the requirement to attend, I could not meet that requirement and knew I would not be able to make that requirement because from mid-March to mid-May of every year we were doing our mid-year audits. I was in the Marine Corps and one of the senior auditors. So I realized at the time that it was ludicrous for me to be a member and I was just paying dues for nothing and I couldn't go to meetings or anything else. I didn't have any idea at the time what CALLERLAB was all about, other than what people had told me, but, John and I couldn't sit down for 2 or 3 days, so he could really fill me into what it's about. After I retired from the Marine Corps, I went to work for the courts. I ran the court system. I was clerk of the court, or my actual title was chief clerk administrator. I ran the 4th largest judicial district in the state of California. And for those of you who may have read the paper a few years ago, you might remember spring break in Palm Springs. Well, I had rejoined CALLERLAB, and again, no chance of making a meeting. Why? Because out of hundreds of thousands of citations, we put out about 70% of them in that 2-week period, and they, right around Easter, and I ain't going to be here. I guarantee you that. I was kept from attending. I did manage to make one meeting that wound up in Las Vegas, and I did that. I paid for it later, but I did make that meeting because I wanted to be a part of this. And then later on, BMI ASCAP, I kept my membership, but I drifted back into being a subscriber because I couldn't meet the attendance requirements. Later on, BMI ASCAP came along, and I still kept my membership, but I wanted to come back. Well, then I retired, and ever since I've retired, I've been here every year. It kept me out. And there was no need for me to be a member of CALLERLAB because I couldn't do anything. CALLERLAB couldn't do anything for me. The only thing CALLERLAB can do for somebody really today, in their mind, is provide licensing. Okay, but once I got here and I realized what it's about, I want to be a part, and I am a part of it. Okay, I'm a big part of it right now, and I want to continue to be a part. I don't want to be on the board, but I want to be a part of what's going on here. But the requirement kept me out, and for many years that I would like to have been a part of it and cast a vote, but had no say-so. The other thing is, if we have a brother association, ACA, and they have no attendance requirements, we might be shooting ourselves in our own foot. Thank you.
A couple of points I'd like to...
Would you tell me who's next so I can head in that direction?
I think Greg is...
Is it Greg or Otto?
John's in charge of that. Jim, up here. What the bylaws say is on the mail voting after the convention, the number of valid ballots returned is equal to 1/3 of the voting members, so at least 1/3 of the ballots need to come back. A ballot is sent to every voting member. 1/3 of those must come back to make it a valid ballot. And 2/3 of the ballots returned must favor rescinding the decision. So a decision is made at the convention. We send a ballot to every voting member. 1/3 of those must come back, and 2/3 of those coming back must favor rescinding the action in order for it to be rescinded. And answer or follow up to what Cliff was saying, I believe that there's a pretty big misconception among CALLERLAB members and non-CALLERLAB members that if you're not a voting member, there's nothing that you can do and there's nothing you can vote on. And that is very far from the truth, because almost everything that happens in CALLERLAB happens at the committee level. The programs, the definitions, the list, the timing, the styling of every program is controlled by that particular program. The women calling things, the partner, every piece of business, with a couple of exceptions, and the major one, of course, is the election of the Board of Governors. That's a membership vote. Almost everything else that CALLERLAB does is done by committees. In order to be on a committee and vote on the committee, you only have to be an associate member. So if you're not a voting member, you're still on the committee and you vote on committee business. I think that's an important point. Right, and that's part of the fall of the Home Office, that we need to publicize that more, so that everybody knows that even if you're not quote this voting member thing, you still have a tremendous amount of power by getting on the committees and voting that way.
Sorry, I asked for time. Vernon Jones again. You mentioned that after the convention that we send out ballots, and it takes 1/3 of the voting members to respond to make anything, whether they overturn or ratify or whatever. Has the membership ever responded with 1/3 of the votes being returned?
Not to my knowledge. John, did it ever happen?
We have never had a 2/3 vote of those that responded. Never had a 2/3 vote of those that responded. I cannot recall. I think we have had those where at least one-third of the ballots sent out to ratify the action has
in the
returned.
time that I've been intimately involved, we've not had a third
I
of the
think
ballots come
our
back.
T2000 vote did generate a one-third response. It didn't get the two-thirds to change it, but it did generate a one-third response from the membership.
Could very well be. Could be, yeah.
The point I wanted to make was Chuck's concern about convention attendance. It would be possible, perhaps, for us to change our convention format to once every 2 years or some other schedule if convention attendance turned out to be severely affected by this. I personally don't think it will be. I think most callers now who have been to a convention understand the value of it and come for reasons other than the membership requirement. There are certainly a few who are here because they have to be, but I think most of us come because it's fun and we meet our friends and we do things that we think are important. But one alternative that's available to us is to change to an every other year schedule of conventions.
Otto is next, and while John's making his way back, I'll take a moment to jump in. For years, I have said that I believe that the heart and soul of CALLERLAB lived at the convention, and I've been adamant about not giving up on an attendance requirement of some sort, and we have watered it several times, and it always wounds me that we do, and because I so much want people to be here, and I've said this in the boardroom and so on before. I was just so totally caught up after my very first CALLERLAB convention. I mean, I just thought it was the best thing since sliced bread, and it was everything I wanted to be about, and it's just been a major part of my life. And I feel like everybody should feel that way. Well, of course, that's not real, and I've kind of outgrown some of that, but not my love for it, but my visions, my rose-colored glasses, I guess. But we have changed in terms of who we are. We've become more of a fraternal organization, I think, in many ways, than purely a professional organization, where I think we kind of started, even before my time in the organization. And that's not necessarily a bad thing at all. That's a good thing, and I think we need not have barriers to having people not only be a part of, but feeling a part of and feeling enfranchised, empowered as part of the organization, and not being made to feel like second-class citizens. I think those are important aspects of things that have unfortunately become the perception, whether it was intended or not. That's still out there, so it would be good to find a way to get past that. I think I could readily buy into what Greg and John are both talking about, of like at least a one-time attendance, so they could be asked to feel it. I mean, I could buy into that. I was ready to say, okay, if that's what we have to do, I'll bite the bullet again and go along. But I could certainly warm to that kind of an amendment myself. Since this is an open forum, I've kind of taken off my sitting up here hat and putting my I'm a member hat. I could warm to that more readily than doing away with it entirely. But let's remember that this has come up in the past repeatedly, and the membership has voted it down every time, and I think often it's because we're partly voting with our own personal pocketbooks. I'm here. I've spent the money. I've taken my vacation time. I've taken my time away from my clubs. I've spent my dollars and so on to be here. By George, let them do it too, and so they've voted it down. And I think we need to open our minds beyond that if we possibly can, to some degree at least. And so I would kind of urge us to look at this very seriously as a probability of the world we live in today. And if we need to modify, I could get behind that. I think that would be a panacea, at least to some degree. For me, I feel better about, if I have to give up that much, I could feel better about the way we're heading now. But it's Otto's turn.
Well, I see it, Otto Waterman from Texas. I see it totally different in that I was really honored to come to CALLERLAB in Chicago in '76. It was a real honor to me. I was joining a professional organization, and I think that as a professional organization, and we can be a fraternal organization, but I truly believe that we've had a drop in the abilities of the caller to do some aspects of our activity. And I see it as a revitalization, as being in sales for so many years. If salesmen did not, and there are salesmen that made $500,000 a year, they still attended seminars. They still attended classes. And if they can't attend in their profession and perfect their profession, then I feel sorry for them. We don't have good one-night callers anymore. We don't have good beginner program callers anymore. And I think it should be a requirement that they get revitalized every 4 years. I'm sorry. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Are you sure?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yikes Cameron from New Hampshire. I am kind of in a unique position, too, in that I was privileged to attend the very first CALLERLAB Convention in 1974, right here. It's deja vu all over again. But for various reasons, income-wise and so on, after a few years of participating and enjoying the chance to mold some of the programs, I was on the mainstream committee initially, I dropped out because I couldn't afford to go to a convention. It was just too much of a strapping financially on me and my family at the time. Things have gotten a little bit better, thank you, but frankly, the only reason I came back in again was because of the requirement now for ASCAP and BMI, but since then, I've renewed my interest in what's going on, too, so it's kind of been a refreshment, too, but there was that little gap. I didn't have my 8 years in there. I know you discussed this earlier, but the convention requirement had been a chore. I think what rescued me was, I guess it must have been 4 years ago, right now, Jim, when we did the one in Portland, the mini lab in Portland, Maine. Wow, close to home, I can almost commute to that, so that saved me. The mini labs are really making a difference. I want to, if I can diverge a little bit, maybe you discussed this earlier, but I have a real question. In the first part of the bylaws, just on that first page, under the first definition of an active member, the last sentence says active is defined as calling dances on at least a weekly basis, averaging over the prior 3 years. Now, is that when you initially become a member, or does that mean for the last 3 years I should have been calling 50?
For the last 3 years, over the past 3 years, you need to have averaged 50 dances a year. So theoretically, you could call 150 dances the last year, and over the last 3, it's 50.
Okay.
Theoretically.
I'm listed as an active member. I have my voting card with me and all that. Over the last 3 years, I have been a member with fewer than 50 dances. Each year when I renew my dues, that's the 2 different categories, because that's what I do. This year, I am planning for various reasons to retire from calling, from active calling at the end of the year. It'll be 40 years for me in September. And so I've got maybe 12.5 dances all year. And I planned it that way to kind of ease out of it.
Right.
But I've been allowed to be an active member. Is this a mistake on CALLERLAB's part, or what's going on?
No,
I'm sure there are others in the same category.
Were you here for the first part of the discussion?
No, I missed it. So.
There is a longevity clause. It doesn't say longevity clause, but it turns out that if you have been an active member, as you have been, for 8 consecutive years, then the requirement to continue calling 50 dances a year is no longer waived.
Okay. I was an active member for probably 6 consecutive years when I dropped out. And going back to what Betsy said earlier, when I re-upped after a break of a few years, according to the bylaws, as I understand it, I had to go then another 8 years before I would qualify. Is that correct?
What I'd have to do is go back and look at the history that we have on you and see if perhaps if it sounds like what you're saying is you shouldn't be a voting member. So I'd have to.
Well, that's what I'm wondering if I'm going to turn in my card. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's something I need a clarification on.
Greg Anderson.
Greg Anderson, I kind of am sorry that Cliff had to leave, because although I have stated my feelings on attending at least one convention, I can empathize with Cliff's situations that he was describing, to where it's not just a matter of a person not scraping up the bucks to come to the convention, but job situations can interfere with that kind of an intent. And I was hoping to ask him the question if there was anything, since he's now been to CALLERLAB, does he, as that type of individual, agree with my basic premise? And if he does, or does not, either way, does he see anything that CALLERLAB should offer as an alternative? And I'm thinking outside the box, and this is probably impractical, and Jerry would probably just soon, I wouldn't even suggest it, but, something off the wall like 2 days of voluntary servitude in the CALLERLAB home office. I noticed you turned me off. I forgot you were right there by the controls. But, yeah, paybacks are, yes, they are. And that may be a totally impractical situation, but something like that, to where a person could be in a CALLERLAB environment at a different time of year. And I'm not saying that's the one, but maybe we need to think outside the box to try to figure out some way to accommodate those people who really want to come to a CALLERLAB convention but cannot for those reasons. And if that is feasible, then it would be a win-win situation for me because of my philosophy of at least attending one CALLERLAB event. And true, the mini labs have helped in that regard, but maybe that's something that we can address on down the road as a possible situation. Also, the carrot versus the stick. It would be nice if carrots or benefits would be enough to get people to come on a reasonably regular basis, rather than the stick of forced requirements to be here every X number of years. Maybe there can be something along, and again, this is thinking outside the box, and this idea is probably impractical, but it might get us along some other avenue of thinking later on. Something like airline miles, to where every convention you attend, you accumulate X number of CALLERLAB points, and after you've accumulated Y number of CALLERLAB points, it is redeemable for whatever. But the main point being a carrot as opposed to a stick.
Milt Floyd again. I have mixed feelings on this. In Minnesota, I know personally 2 callers that do not belong to our State Callers Association, do not belong to our Regional Callers Association, but belong to CALLERLAB strictly for their licensing for BMI and ASCAP. If we allow these people, and they would be termed active callers because they are calling more than 50 dances a year, they are not involved in the activity as, in my opinion, they should be. They are focused more on their own piece of the pie, and yet if we don't have a convention attendance requirement, they would have as much weight in their vote on our business as I would. And I can empathize with what Cliff said in that jobs take you away, and life changes take you away, and finances take you away, but I just don't see that we should do away with this requirement.
Again, as you can see, the next folks are rolling in, so we really need to...
In a practical sense, let's keep in mind that the mail ballot has never overturned what's been voted at the convention. So the people who attend the convention are still the ones that are going to run the voting activities of the organization, with the one exception being the vote for the board membership vote. That one, everybody gets to vote on by mail. But everything else that we vote on is done by people at the convention, and the chance of that vote being overturned is near zero.
Right, but again, I really want to emphasize the fact that almost all of the business that CALLERLAB does is done by the committees, and you don't have to come to a convention to be on a voting member of a committee. And we've probably got about 3 or 4 more minutes.
I'm going to stick 2 cents worth in here, and one of the reasons that this comes up is because people, instead of being like Chuck or whoever was saying that they set it as a goal, people in today's society, instead of seeing it as a goal, they see it as being stepped on. The requirement to come to convention, how dare anybody require me, any group require me to do anything? I personally have always felt that it was very valuable to come to convention and very important, and to get a feel for the group. My feeling is the same as John and Greg's and other people have expressed, which is I think you need to come at least once. If the members agree, they can vote this down.
Like Larry has one quick comment.
On that, come at least once. If we went in that direction and we wanted to encourage people to sign up now, you might also consider, instead of having to attend before you got to vote, you might have to attend within the first 4 years, once in the first 4 years of your membership, so that you didn't have to feel you were waiting for membership.
Okay, I think that'll probably...
We tried that waiting over a 4 year period. That never worked.
Right. Once again, that will finish...
a great many problems. I think initial attendance might be very feasible, but to say you may join and we'll make you a full member, but you got to attend more than once, doesn't happen.
Once again, that'll finish up this session, and we appreciate you coming, your candid comments, and we look to more of them tomorrow.
Absolutely. Thank you, folks. We appreciate it.
There's